everyone, and welcome to my February wrap-up. I read 11 books in February, so that is one less than what my goal was. I was hoping to read 12, but you know what? Life happens. It was a shorter month. I finished a book yesterday, which was March 1st, so we're back on track. So before we get into this, I just want to apologize for my voice. I am sick and I am unfortunately home from work today, which is why I get to film a video, so that is good, but I'm not feeling well, so if I sound bad, it's because I feel bad. The first book that I read in February was 11/22/63 by Stephen King. I rated this book 4 stars. This is a lot of people's favorite Stephen King book, and specifically their favorite recent Stephen King book, and along with The Stand and The Shining, I think they are and It are probably some of the top rated Stephen King books, but it definitely wasn't one of my favorites. A lot of people love the ending and it wasn't for me. But it's a really interesting concept. It's about a man who finds kind of a portal into the past and goes back in time to try to prevent the JFK assassination. It's a very long book. It was very interesting. But it just wasn't one of my favorite books. One thing that I will say about this book is I do love the connections that it has to the Stephen King multiverse, and specifically in the first part. If you are a fan of It, there's going to be something you really enjoy in here, and I would recommend it. The next book that I read this month is called Good to Go by Christy Ashwandin. This is a book that discusses different recovery modalities, specifically for athletes. I rated this book 3.5 stars, and I really enjoyed listening to it while running. It really gave me a few good ideas to plan ahead in terms of what I could do for myself when I returned from the run. However, I did find that as a scientific book, it chose questionable research, or maybe even though it talked a lot about how to choose research when you're deciding what to believe, I didn't find it did the best job. But, I enjoyed the book. I learned some stuff from it. I don't remember much of it though, so it's going to be a 3.5 from me. The next book that I read this month is Lullabies for Little Criminals by Heather O'Neill, and I rated this book 3.5 stars. This is a book that probably has countless trigger warnings, and it's also a book that is written as if it's a memoir, but it's a fictional book. I would have really enjoyed it if it was a memoir, but as a fiction book, it just didn't exactly do what I wanted it to do. It's about a young girl who has to overcome a lot of obstacles. It has a lot of hard topics discussed. And again, if you are someone who suffers from PTSD, I would definitely read the trigger warnings before diving into this book. The next book that I read last month was Grandma Gatewood's Walk by Ben Montgomery. I rated this book 3 stars. And this has been a book that I've been wanting to read for such a long time, and I was so excited to finally start it. So yeah, 3 stars was a disappointing rating, but this story basically covers an older woman's walk or through hike of the entire Appalachian Trail, and she did it, without any special gear. Probably one of the most rugged, I would guess, walks of the entire Appalachian Trail. And it discusses her life. It kind of flashes back and forward in time about different things that are happening. And the story is based on the diary that she kept. And just the way it was written, I found that I couldn't connect with with the person as much as I wanted to. And as I said, this was one book that I was really looking forward to. So that was a little bit disappointing. But I still think it's a great read, especially for someone who's thinking of through hiking. The next book that I read this month is called Thinner by Richard Bachman, aka Stephen King. This is a great read. I rated this 4.5 stars. It is classified as a horror novel, but I would definitely say it's more of a thriller. I really enjoyed this book. I was not expecting to, but this is a book about a man who gets cursed by a gypsy and begins to lose weight. So it's a really interesting story. I did not know how it was going to end. I didn't know where it was going to go. And I'll talk about it more in next month's wrap-up, but I am so obsessed with Stephen King's multiverse and the connections. And there are just some connections in this book that made me so happy. The next book that I read this month was Will by Will Smith. And, this was a book that I just happened to be able to get my hands on the audiobook of. I didn't think I would because of how new of a release it is. So on a whim, I got the audiobook and I listened to it, and oh my gosh. I rated this book 5 stars. Now, I am a big fan of memoirs and autobiographies, but there were just so many things in this book that I didn't know. There are so many things, I guess, about Will Smith that I didn't know, because I don't really know much about famous people. But there was actually a day where I was running 3-minute intervals. So in preparing for the run, I thought to myself, it would be really great if I just ran, one song on, one song off. But I couldn't not listen to the book, so I had to, pay attention to the clock. But that was worth it because this was such a great book. I literally could not put it down. And that just makes me so happy because it was also just so unexpected. I'm not a big Will Smith fan, or haven't followed his career. So for me to love his book this much was so great. The next book that I read this month was The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is considered a classic or a modern classic. I rated it 1.5 stars. At first, I thought I could enjoy it, but towards the end, I just really couldn't. I didn't know anything about this book going into it, so if I had maybe known the premise, I maybe would have enjoyed it more. But long story short, it is a woman's descent into madness. And, when a book is written in a way that you don't know what is true and not true, this will come up again in a bit, I just don't really know what to do with that. So in this case, I really didn't enjoy it. 1.5 stars from me. The next book that I read this month is Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie. And this is my first Agatha Christie novel. So that was exciting. She's one of the best-selling authors of all time, I believe, or maybe the best-selling author or mystery thriller author. I don't know. But she's super famous, and it is important to keep in mind that these books were written a really long time ago. But I still didn't enjoy it. And I was really looking forward to having like a good little murder mystery action, a little bit of a brain break, but it just didn't accomplish what I was hoping it would accomplish. It wasn't terrible. I did rate it 3 stars, but, it wasn't something that I enjoyed. But, maybe I need to read more Agatha Christie, and I didn't realize until I started it that this is actually a book in a series, and it's not the first book. So again, maybe if I had known the main detective for a longer amount of time, I would have enjoyed it more. But I do plan on reading some more Agatha Christie. The next book that I read this month is What the Dog Saw by Malcolm Gladwell. And if you've watched my videos, you know that me and Malcolm have a bit of an up and down relationship. I've hated some of his books and I've liked some of his books, but unfortunately this was one that I did not enjoy. I rated it 1.5 stars, and I feel like even that was generous. This is... I feel like you could use this book as an example of how not to write with evidence. The author chooses, anecdotal evidence, stories, and then tries to use them as a basis to make an argument on. And that's not really how science works. As someone who has written a thesis and has gone through like the grueling work of, supporting your argument and making sure that your claims are being backed by the evidence, it was really frustrating to try to read this book. The other thing is, again, another thing, same as last month, I don't enjoy these random stories that have no narrative. And I didn't realize that it was kind of like a collection of his writings, but, it just wasn't for me. All right, 2 more books this month. So the second last book that I read this month is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I rated this book 3.5 stars. It was such a tough book to rate because, again, I don't want to give anything away, but I just didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know if at the end, I know I'm losing my words, but that's kind of what the book did to me. I didn't know if I loved it or hated it. It does wrap up cleanly, which is a good thing, and it doesn't leave any questions, which I appreciated, but I don't like those kind of things. I don't like when you don't know what is reality and what isn't, and I thought this was going to be such an amazing book because the start of it had me so spooked. Like, I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like, I was lying in bed thinking about it, woke up in the middle of the night thinking about it, and then it was just kind of a letdown. So 3.5 stars, but you know, it got some extra marks for scaring me. The final book that I read this month was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. I rated this book 3.5 stars. It is a memoir. I do think that In the Dream House is a very important book, but I do take my enjoyment of a book into account on the rating. So that's why I couldn't give it a very high rating, or like the highest rating, because I didn't enjoy it. I'm still very glad that it's a book that exists, and I feel like it could help a lot of people and a lot of people would enjoy it, but I just wasn't one of those people. The other thing I will say is it is written very lyrically. It has a very lyrical, poetic style of writing, which I know a lot of people enjoy. But as I've talked about before, that's not really something that I look for in a book. Okay, well, those are the 11 books that I read in February. I don't think that March is going to be, a great reading month because I have a lot of traveling planned, which I'm really excited about. I'm planning on going to Greece and Scotland and London. So lots of traveling, lots of family time. So I don't think it's going to be the greatest reading month, but I'm very excited for it nonetheless. And yeah, I think that my, extra reading in January and February will allow me to hit my reading goal for 2022, which is very, very exciting. All right, thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.